hello to everyone. This time I will try to speak English because we have a very important leader in contemporary music in London. And he is Jonathan Cole, professor at the Royal College of Music in London, and also area leader in master's composition. I know he is very sensitive about a new ecology of sounds and how today the organized sounds can improve our social and ambiental life. So I start with the first question, that is, there is talk more than ever in recent years of pollution and green policy. But air pollution is not only that one of fine dust, in Italian polveri, sottili. It is also noise pollution, overflowing and uncontrolled sounds of which little is said, harmful to our physical and mental health. So the question is, what musical institutions and composers do to deal proactively this noise pollution and its consequences?
Okay, so I think this is a very complex question. I think how composers deal with this, they have to be very inventive in their response to this. Because noise pollution is controlled. If anybody's controlling noise pollution, certainly in London, it's the government and it's the businesses who are determined to create more buildings and expand the business part of London, which always means that there's building work going on. As London becomes busier, then there is more traffic. There are increasing sirens. We have ambulance, we have police, we have all kinds of different sounds of sirens happening. We have helicopters, we have aeroplanes. So we know that there are major problems. And we also know that noise pollution has a comparative response in our bodies as air exhaust fumes as well. And that in terms of our mental health and our stress, this is something that is having a real effect on people at the moment. If I can, I mean, by answering this question, I think we have to look at the process that is taking place at the moment. And I think as people are being surrounded increasingly by noise, they are internalizing their own experience. So, for instance, in London, if you go onto the tube in the morning to work, you find a lot of people have headphones on. And a lot of people have headphones playing music for a great deal of the day. And the result of this is that they are, in a sense, cutting out all the external world around them. They are internalizing their experience. And this is even emphasized now even more with masks as well. So you see people with masks and with headphones, and they're looking just forward ahead. They don't want to look around because they need to get to where they're going. So everything is sort of focused here. And one of the big problems, I think, for composers now is to engage listeners with listening externally and how to really reverse this whole internalization of sound, and listening not just to music, but listening to the sounds which surround us. Because Jonathan, I think, yeah.
You mean we can think that music is what we hear in our headphones, but music is sounds and the context of these sounds. This is the difference between to concentrate ourselves in what we think to be music, and then not so concentrated on the sounds of our context. And
exactly, and I think there's also more damage because the more people have headphones on and are constantly listening to music, this becomes a soundtrack to their life. It's like they're in a film. And, you know, with film music, really good film music is when we can almost stop listening to it, and we become unaware of it, and we just focus on the visual action in front of us. And this is, in a sense, is what is happening to music as well, because people are using it. It's being used as a means to get them through the day, rather than as something to really focus on and engage with in a meaningful way. But I think, so one of the issues is how we sort of reverse this desensitization to sound, and we try and engage listeners in a way that they can start again to focus on external sounds, in a way that doesn't damage them or create stress or any of the other health problems that we know come from.
And what do you think that musical institutions and composers can do?
Well, I think in the way that we teach our composers, and we make them aware of these issues, this is very important, because obviously the young composers coming in are very much part of a culture that is internalized in every way. I mean, they've grown up now we have students who have grown up completely with the internet. And their whole experience, or a large part of their experience of life, is within this little box. It's not out here, and communication is done through this little box, and the headphones, in a sense, are an extension of that. So I think as teaching young composers is as much about teaching them to relate to the world, and to realize that actually engaging it with the world on a one-to-one level and in a very real way is immensely rewarding, and will bring great benefits in terms of health and happiness and creativity as well. Because if one lives within the world of others' experiences, which is very much what the internet is, then one is not really expanding one's own imagination, and one isn't really looking outwards creatively. So I think it's in terms of institutions, it's very much the way that they engage young musicians and composers with these. But it's difficult for institutions to impose certain restrictions, because, I mean, a musical conservatoire is a very noisy place, you know, and you walk into the Royal College of Music, where I teach, and you hear people practicing in different rooms, and it's a wonderful experience. But it's only wonderful if one is able to really engage with these sounds, and start to see the value of them. I mean, one of the things we do is we have weekly free improvisation classes, and we sit in a room very often with the lights off. So we sit in the dark, and rather than having any score or any ideas, we use the sounds that are around us, that outside the room. And these might be people talking, these might be footsteps, it may be somebody practicing the horn upstairs, or somebody playing the piano next door. It might be traffic going past. And we bring those sounds into the room and use them as a starting point for our improvisation. And I think this is quite a valuable exercise.
So if I have well understood, the first important thing is to start from listening to learning to listening, also silence, sounds, and not only what we think is music.
Absolutely. And I think listening is an active skill, you know, and it's something that we do have to learn, and it's a skill as we listen to other people and we try and engage with other people without our own thoughts clouding our minds. It's the same with listening to sounds. I mean, I'm a very light sleeper, and so when I first moved to London, this was a real problem for me, the noise in London. And so I started to trick myself that, this sounds very childish, but it became quite useful, is to rather than push sounds away, because I think that's, if you try and push a sound away, it means that when it comes, it will have even stronger impact on you, and it can be more damaging. So rather than push sounds away, I try to actually bring them in to my mind and into my imagination, and even like police sirens and ambulances, and fire engines and all these things. I thought of these as weird creatures, you know, weird sort of dinosaur-like creatures roaming the streets of London at night. And, you know, so it became a sort of fantastical, imaginative idea in my mind. And I think how we transform these sounds in a way. I mean, one of the difficulties is that many of the sounds we're talking about have within them a level of stress. It's implied. You know, when we hear a police car zooming past, we know that there's something happening, and it's on. This is an instinctive feel, you know, and this relates to our listening skill as being aware of danger, going right back.
I understand. Wonderful, Jonathan.
Yeah.
So you have just answered in part to the second question, but the second question is, can similar research projects from Murray Schafer's The Tuning of the World onwards still be implemented or possibly completely remodeled to achieve greater environmental and social impact? If so, what would you propose in this direction? You have just proposed something.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an ongoing problem, and as the world is changing, and it's changing at such a fast speed at the moment in many ways, that we just have to adapt to these changes. But I see it as a continuation of the work of Schafer, and also composers like Hildegard Vesterkamp, and Anea Lockwood, and composers who are really using environmental sounds as a source for their work. And certainly, you know, in recent years, in the courses that I teach, for instance, we focus on this work as being a very important part of the musical development over recent decades. And you know, all of this in a sense comes from John Cage as well. And I mean, John Cage is very much the godfather of all of these people sort of looking down, you know. But it's, I mean, the way we listen and the way we are able to see the beauty in the sounds that we may initially find very terrifying or stressful, but actually start to actually not judge these sounds and try and remove the implications of these sounds. You know, when we hear a drill or when we hear a hammer, we can feel the force of energy behind this, and it's very strong at whatever distance. You know, even if you hear a drill a long way away, there is still this force of energy, which can be very liberating as well as also stressful. So I think it's how we gradually train our minds in order to not judge these sounds and really sort of see them as pure sounds in themselves.
Yeah. And now I invent another question, because when you spoke about John Cage, I had an idea. What do you think about the relations of the ideas by Cage and then Schafer's of tuning, and in Europe, for example, Eric Satie, the furniture music, musique d'ameublement, no?
Yes.
Because I think there is something.
Absolutely. And you know, it comes down to the ambient music to some extent with Satie, but I think it's very much, you know, what we choose to engage with and how we engage with it. And I mean, Murray Schafer was such an extraordinary figure, because he brought to our attention so many of the sounds that are disappearing within our landscapes as certain species become extinct, but also an awareness of the history of how sounds have changed throughout time. I mean, London has always been a very busy, a very loud, busy, chaotic city, you know. And if you go back hundreds of years, the city would have been filled with the sounds of church bells, ringing every hour. We would have heard tradesmen, blacksmiths. We would have heard people shouting all the time. It would have been still a very noisy city. But now we have more buildings, and now it's much more densely populated. Those sounds can't travel the same distance, so they become refracted and reflected, and they sort of become absorbed within the city. So it's a very different listening experience. But I think it's how we listen. I mean, very simply, how we listen. And I think as composers, we have to approach this in a very individual and inventive way, and try and find solutions that draw people's attention to these sounds, but at the same time we don't condemn them. We don't say that all sounds are bad and that we need silence, you know, because silence, the true silence, exists sometimes within sounds in themselves.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Maybe we can see that the listeners, and every listener is a composer. And
absolutely.
He decides.
I mean,
he decides how to compose the sounds around. Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. Third question, last but not least, it is indeed a fundamental priority of our project. We wish to activate virtuous collaborations between higher institutions. Which institutions do you consider particularly sensitive and organized to face a new ecology of sound by opening up to possible collaboration with the Milan Conservatory? You know, our idea by me and soprano Tiziana Scandaletti is and wants to be possibly connected to Milan Conservatory. No, this is just the first step of a project that we want to propose, but we have to start in some manner. So, which institutions you think can be?
Okay, so I mean, obviously, I can only really speak with a proper knowledge about the institution that I'm in. But I mean, looking around Britain, for instance, there are some really forward-looking university and conservatoire departments.
Do you think that the times are good times to open a dialogue in this sense?
Oh yes, I think it's crucial. Absolutely, it's a very good time right now, and I think because it's related to how we receive information, you know, and this is something that is very important at the moment in terms of young people and how they are engaging with the world through the internet, and we know that stress levels are rising and anxiety is rising amongst young people. And I think noise pollution is very much a part of this. So I think it's, the sooner we engage with this, the better.
Oh yeah, great. Of course, it would be better to talk more with you.
Yeah.
Everything is so interesting, and so also relation to our activities here in Italy. But this is just a first step for the future, and we hope that a wider project can start. So we want to thank you very much. Also, Tiziana Scandaletti, that is a fundamental collaborator in this idea, in this project. Gives you her greetings, and is
well, thank you very much.
Sorry not to be here, but this is a first step.